fascinating data coming out of the Home Office. I love it from the official data regarding channel migrants. So this is illegal migration, people who come on those small boats, although, as one of my guests pointed out yesterday, they're not that small anymore, these boats, with 50 people on them. But basically, the Labour has tried to blame the huge number of crossings, gone up, 40% in this year, in the same period compared to last year, saying, look, it's down to the weather. And I've always been of the view that actually the weather has more impact on how many people cross than any government policy. But when they publish data showing, look, the red days, as they call them, the days when, you know, the weather is actually calm enough, the wind's low enough and the waves are low enough, that actually you can make a load of crossings. We see a big spurt of people, like 1,200 on Saturday alone. We all remember how lovely the weather was on Saturday. Well, they've shown this, put this information out. Turns out, actually, on the red days, the calm weather days, when when Tories were in charge and they still had the Rwanda policy in place, there were fewer people coming than there are now without the Rwanda policy in place. And there was a notable jump after each decision which made it look like the Rwanda policy was going to disappear. And certainly once Labour got into power and said Rwanda policy gone, a big jump in the number of people arriving. Is this proof that the Rwanda policy, the Rwanda scheme, did actually provide a deterrence?
I don't think we can say it's absolute proof, but I do think it had an effect, because it was talked about within migrant communities over social media channels. People were saying you may not get to stay in the United Kingdom. So it certainly had that aspect. But it makes you laugh with the Labour Party pointing, going, it's the weather, because when we were in government with the Conservative Party, every time we said, look, it's a really sunny day, we're going to get more crossings, the Labour Party laughed at us. So,
and anyway, by the way, on behalf of voters, that shouldn't be a sodding excuse for having no border control.
No, we absolutely shouldn't.
I know it doesn't happen often in Britain, but we do sometimes have nice weather. Yes. And I don't think we can have a policy where, absolutely, come on in because the weather's lovely.
No, absolutely not. But it does make you laugh. You get that level of hypocrisy from them. But Rwanda was a funny fish because it was never set up well. It was always doomed to fail, but it did have an effect. And at the moment, we have absolutely nothing.
No, exactly. And we've seen other European countries now looking at their sort of deterrent policy. My view is that the government had the right to do this. The courts didn't have the right to strike it down, and we should have done it. But we should have done it on a grand scale. It had to be anyone who arrives gets sent to Rwanda, not a couple of hundred people, which is what the original plan was. That's not enough of a deterrent. If you're willing to get one of those rickety boats to come across the channel and risk your life doing that, probably risking your life travelling across Europe a lot of the way to get to a completely safe country like, France, you're not going to be deterred by the small chance you might be sent to Rwanda when you have to start the trip all over again. That's the reality. We are a soft touch, and we've had, haven't we, French MPs and others pointing out, look, the reason why we have a load of people arriving is because we're a soft touch on benefits, soft touch on immigration. You get to stay here, really. If you get here, realistically, you're going to get to stay here, and you're not in a tent in the rain in Calais. Yes, it does rain in Calais. You are going to be in a okay, it might not be the most salubrious hostel or hotel or a private flat, but you've got accommodation and 3 square meals a day. What do you make of the German Chancellor? This is Friedrich Merz. They put together this coalition of basic Tories and Labour, CDU and the SPD there. He's basically a Tory leader, Conservative leader there. He basically took office last month, finally, after very lengthy coalition debates, promising to end illegal immigration. Pretty strong announcement. And basically, he announced that his government, within days, the government would basically routinely reject migrants at the frontier on all their land borders unless those migrants could prove they had a legitimate reason to enter the country. That they were either, you had to be a pregnant woman, an unaccompanied child, particularly vulnerable, had specific proof that you were the victim of some sort of abuse that meant you had to be allowed in, which of course most people cannot provide because it's not the case. They are economic migrants. Coming from, basket case, terrible countries, but sorry, we don't have to let everyone in the world in. Now, since they've had that policy, there's been a 45% increase in the number of migrants turned away compared to the same period 12 months earlier. However, a Berlin court struck it down and said, no, this is not incompatible with EU rules. The Chancellor of Germany has said, no, we're going to carry on doing it. Why can't we do that?
Because we don't have a Prime Minister willing to stand up and say those things. We need to be a hell of a lot tougher. We haven't been. And even me in my woolly liberal mode, as you like to call it.
Sorry, I always spat my tea out. You're a woolly liberal. Genuinely, I've just got tea everywhere now. You're a woolly liberal. When did that happen?
Well, you called me that ages ago when I had one of my moments on migration.
A brief moment.
Brief moment. But
we invited her back.
Teach me the error of my ways. We need to be a lot tougher, and I think that if Germany are turning around after saying refugees welcome, everybody come here,
thanks Angela,
to find that didn't work, then we need to be following suit. I do think it's slightly easier for Germany because their borders are land borders for the majority, so easier to turn people away. You can literally put up barriers.
Well, yeah, except for the whole, there's literally a big body of water between us and other countries.
But once you've got them here, it's very, very difficult, isn't it? Once they've come across the channel, it's not... Well, we can't have that argument about turning boats back and wave machines and things like that. We can't.
If the rules don't let you do it, the rules are wrong, change the rules. Very simple, duh.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I don't know how much longer the British people are going to put up with this. We're watching other countries deal with it, and, Italy, exchange with Albania and everything else. And there is a point where people say enough is enough. It's fascinating how much the genuine woolly liberals, Labour government, large number of the Tories, Lib Dems and Greens and everyone else, Reformers we know is a grand exception in this, that they fundamentally don't really think that mass legal immigration is a problem or that mass illegal immigration is, but they don't really think it's something they want to stop, which is why they don't want to stop it. Because if you want to stop it, you can. Oh, look what Donald Trump did.
Yeah, you can. You just need to change some laws, and you actually have to have the kahunas to be able to go and do that and face down all of your critics. And we don't have a Prime Minister that wants to do it. We don't have a Home Secretary that's willing to do it, and a Foreign Secretary who doesn't know which way is up.
No, exactly. Well, let's talk about this interesting report from Professor Matt Goodwin. He's moved to Buckingham University. It's pretty much all the same people are moving. The only one of the universities in the country where you can actually speak freely and have views which aren't sort of, Ramona. Wasn't lockdown a great thing? Everyone's got mental health problems. They are literally they've all got Israel terrible. They've all got exactly the same views. I cannot recommend his Substack enough, and I know he's doing a big report on this in the Substack. But reported in the Telegraph today, study he's done, research he's done, looking at the trajectory in terms of the number of people coming into this country, but also birth rates of people arriving in this country who are the descendants of relatively recent migrants to this country, but also the birth rate of those already in this country for many generations. He says that white British people will become a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years. So looking at migration, birth rates, death rates, up to the end of the 21st century, he predicts that white British people decline from their current position as 73% of the population to 57% by 2050, and then by 2063 we're slipping into a minority. And by the way, white British declined as people who do not have an immigrant parent. There'll actually be many white people who are non-British here, many Europeans, of course, millions of Europeans who are here, and many who will have one parent who is a migrant. But is this something to worry about, to be concerned about, and if so, why?
I don't think I'm concerned about it, because, as you say, it's ignoring the fact that some people are white in this country but not necessarily British born.
Is it about the colour?
Do you know, I think in some arguments it is. I think in some communities, especially when you're looking at places like Birmingham, parts of Manchester, Bradford, with high Pakistani, Bangladeshi or Muslim populations in general, then you can't get away from having that conversation about the demographics.
Is that a skin colour issue, or is it a cultural issue in terms of people's values and people's belief systems?
I think it's absolutely both. You can have an awful lot of those communities who do integrate absolutely fine. There isn't an issue. Sikh community, for example, where I live in Kent, perfectly well integrated, have been for decades, and are really good members of a community. Doesn't always happen. So I think that this is quite a complex argument to break down.
And that's the thing, it is, isn't it? But there is the main argument here is, if you imagine, let's say Nigeria had demographics where they were going to say within the next 40 years, black native Nigerians will be a minority of the population. I think they would be saying, well, that's what's happening to our country, that has happened.
Yeah.
We only get uncomfortable and everyone gets a little bit, and you know, I'm talking about this before the show, how do you handle this story, you know, when you say the word white, because then by definition, if you've got a concern about people of other colours, you must be racist. But it's not, it's about white British. Yeah. It's about the indigenous population, bearing in mind that was what, 97% of the population until, well, certainly my birth, to the 1960s. Even when you had, you know, the Windrush generation of Afro-Caribbean people coming, that was a tiny number of people. Yeah. A tiny, tiny number of people, and actually very well integrated into British society. Huge rate of, for instance, mixed marriage between white British and Afro-Caribbean British people. Now, you know, we don't see that with many other immigrant populations. And again, sharing similar religious beliefs, such as those inform people's daily life. That is where I think a lot of the issues come. But again, the main issue, I think, for a lot of people will be simply the fact that huge amount of change in a very short period of time, a huge amount of change in one person's lifetime, that no one voted for, no one agreed to, no one was asked about, no one gave permission for, and it's just been imposed on us. Quite apart from the sheer number issue, we haven't built the reservoirs, the energy, the housing, the roads, blah, blah, blah. Quite apart from that, that has got a massive impact. We're already seeing the impact of a massive influx of people from Muslim countries, where the impact on our foreign policy, I'm telling you that Labour's foreign policy regarding Israel will be completely different if we didn't have a large Muslim population and very, very, very loud Muslim community leaders in this country who are talking up the pro-Palestine issue, as opposed to the only democratic ally we have in the Middle East, which is Israel. That has massively affected policy. The blasphemy law, long conversations on the show yesterday about, we have a de facto blasphemy law, a man convicted of burning a Quran. We already had it, because basically you don't burn a Quran because you know you're going to face death or death threats. Simple as that. That's a de facto blasphemy law, and nothing being done about it by the authorities, by the police. And why not? It's not done because we have a large population of Muslims, key Labour constituencies, and indeed in many other key constituencies. That's not an anti-Muslim comment, that's simply a statement of fact in terms of the influence of different people from different backgrounds and cultures and their influence on our politics. So there is a big change. Something Sweden and a few other Nordic countries found, particularly Sweden actually, because they had a massive influx of migrants after 2015, was you know, the massive change in terms of their crime stats, in terms of the immigrant population. Huge. I get Ofcom for this all the time. People make complaints. Well, you just look at the figures. They're official figures in terms of, you know, the rate of violence that's going on from immigrant populations there. It has a massive impact. And the country basically went, no, we don't want this anymore. We've seen what's happened in Holland. We're seeing what happens in Germany. We're seeing what's happened in Italy. We're seeing what's happened in France. People are saying, no, we didn't agree to this. We didn't vote for this. We don't want this. This is too much change. And fundamentally, this is about a democratic deficit, isn't it? You can't... Politicians were elected to do various things. They were never voted in to do what they have done in terms of opening our borders in European countries to anyone who fancied turning up here with a visa or without. And they didn't look at the long-term impact of that on the rest of the country, whether already, you know, living here, whether white, black, Asian or whatever.
And they will never stand up and take responsibility for it. No politician.
Well, no, they'll just shout bigot and racist.
Of course they will. And we'll be called far right or have to have heinous views that we do. But it's a legitimate concern. And I think also we need to look at the Scandi countries and how they deal with an increasing birth rate. They are much better at helping families have more children. They look at schooling, they look at housing, they look at education, you know, all of that, whereas we just don't. So people aren't having children.
So the indigenous population is only having like one, maximum two children on average.
Precisely.
But immigrant populations of various different ethnicities and religions are having a large number more. Yeah. That will have a massive impact within... I mean, predictions is that Muslim population of this country will be 1 in 10 in a couple of decades. That has got to have an impact on every aspect of our life in this country.
And it really does. And they will deal with it with generational living. They don't mind, you know, granny, granddad, everybody living in similar housing or in the same house together. We don't do that as a general rule. But also...
God forbid.
Yes, I couldn't live with my father. But we don't encourage people to have children. We aren't a good nation when it comes to how can we ensure a parent can stay at home.
And enabling couples to have children.